Welcome to another edition of Tool School. I'm Steve Butler, and today we want to talk about Clovers' best premium sewing machine needles. If I were to ask you what is the most important part of your sewing machine, you probably wouldn't guess it's the sewing machine needle, but it is. And if you think about it, you could have the most marvelous sewing machine that's ever been made, and you could put the most wonderful thread through it, but if your sewing machine needle is worn or damaged, or is the wrong type of needle, you're probably not going to get the results that you anticipate. On the other hand, if you had an old beat up sewing machine that you bought at a garage sale that some lady was selling because her mother-in-law gave it to her, and you had some cheap economy-based thread, but you had a brand new sparkling sewing machine needle in it, you're probably going to get a very nice straight stitch out of that machine. So it's very important that you have a needle and understand what that needle does for you. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All the different parts of the sewing machine needle, how they work with the thread, what's so important about the thread size, and what's so important about the sewing machine needle in general to the sewing process. Now let's take a few moments and become more familiar with Clover's best premium sewing machine needle line. Clover realizes the importance of sewing machine needles to the entire sewing process, and we've joined forces with Oregon sewing machine needles to produce a line that'll fit every function that you will need in your sewing process. Now the important parts of a sewing machine needle to realize are the shank, which is the part that slides into your needle bar and holds the needle securely in your machine. You have the shoulder where it tapers down to the blade. The blade is the long part of our needle. It's also called the shaft sometimes. We also have the groove, and this is where your thread actually hides during the sewing process when the needle is going down into the fabric and back out. This is actually the last thread guide for your thread. Then we have the eye of the needle and the point. And the point is different shapes for different applications. The eye of the needle is usually 40% of the width of the blade. The important aspect of the eye of the needle is it has to be 40% larger than the diameter of your thread. So most threads that we use today are either a 40 or a 50 weight, and a size 80 needle works great for that. So if you use a thread that's heavier, and by that I mean thicker, a larger diameter than a 40 weight thread, then you have to use a larger eye needle. If it's something smaller, then you can go to a smaller eye needle. On the back of the needle we have what's called a scarf, and this is the cutout, so when our hook comes by in the sewing process, it can get actually inside the loop and pick up the loop to form our sewn stitch. An important thing to remember about all sewing machine needles is that they're consumable. They don't last forever. Usually about 8 hours of sewing unless you damage it. If you hit a pin or a zipper or something like that, just replace the needle because it won't be perfect. Make sure that you have good quality needles. You can see that Clover has this great line of best premium sewing machine needles. Ask for them at your local sewing shop or contact us at Clover.